You hear the word temporary spoken softly like a blanket offered at dawn, and you accept it because cold truths feel unbearable this early. The currency still buys bread, still opens doors, and that familiarity convinces you nothing essential has changed yet. You tell yourself collapses are loud, violent things, not this gentle thinning you feel when you count change twice. Officials smile carefully, promising correction soon, and their calm becomes your permission to delay fear. Prices wobble like a tired compass needle, drifting but never pointing clearly enough to demand immediate action. You remember stronger days and assume memory equals guarantee, mistaking history for insurance. Debt enters quietly, not as threat, but as reassurance, offering bridges across gaps you prefer not to measure. Each bridge holds at first, reinforcing the belief that stress-tested is the same as safe. You begin adjusting habits slightly, calling it flexibility proof that systems can bend without breaking. The word temporary repeats until it loses edges, smoothing anxiety into something almost manageable. Shops stay open, lights remain on, and continuity becomes evidence that warnings are exaggerated. You notice savings shrink faster than explanations grow, yet comfort yourself with the promise of reversal. Dependency forms subtly, like leaning on a cane you did not plan to need tomorrow. The currency feels lighter in your hand, but weight is subjective, easily dismissed with routine. You avoid stillness because silence makes patterns easier to see. Confidence persists as habit, not conviction, moving forward because stopping would raise questions. Small losses arrive disguised as noise fluctuations. You wave away with practiced optimism. You realize too late that temporary is not a time frame, but a story told to keep panic polite. The ground has already shifted just slowly enough to feel like settling rather than collapse. And so you stand calmly, unaware that acceptance is the first quiet stage of letting value slip away. You keep repeating temporary because it sounds like control, and control is the last familiar taste you can still recognize. The first real warning is not a headline, but a cashier's pause, eyes flicking to the register as if it might argue. You laugh it off, performing normalcy because panic feels childish, and you refuse to be seen as weak. Officials describe the dip as a breeze, yet the curtains move strangely, as if the wind is coming from inside the house. You notice imported goods like distant luxuries, now priced like museum artifacts behind glass you cannot touch. Your paycheck arrives on time, but it feels smaller, like someone trimmed the edges while you slept. Debt offers comfort again, a warm drink that briefly steadies your hands while quietly dulling your senses. You accept it, telling yourself, borrowing is temporary too. A bridge back to normal roads. Friends start speaking in half jokes about leaving, and you hear sincerity hiding under the laughter. Confidence remains in public, but in private, it rots like fruit that looks perfect until you press a thumb into it. The news shows graphs like weather forecasts, suggesting storms can be waited out with umbrellas and patience. You begin stockpiling small things, not enough to admit fear, just enough to feel prepared without confessing. The word stabilization replaces problem, a fresh coat of paint over the same damp wall. You feel dependency tightening subtle as a ring that still fits until one day it will not. Every solution offered seems to require time you do not have. Yet you keep buying time like it's on sale. The currency keeps functioning, and that function becomes your excuse to ignore its weakening pulse. You notice more people counting carefully, shoulders hunched as if protecting their wallets from the air itself. Temporary begins to sound like denial, and denial begins to sound like prayer. Nights grow longer, not in hours, but in dread, as if darkness has learned your schedule. And still you tell yourself tomorrow will correct it, because admitting otherwise would mean you must change today. Morning routines continue, but they feel ceremonial now. Gestures performed to reassure yourself that order still exists somewhere. You notice how often conversations end with silence, everyone sensing more than they are willing to name aloud. Confidence leans heavily on repetition because familiarity feels safer than truth. When stability begins to feel conditional, the currency still circulates, yet it moves faster, as if trying to escape hands before anyone counts too closely. Officials ask for patience again, stretching the word until it becomes thin enough to see through. You begin comparing prices instinctively, memorizing numbers the way one memorizes exits in a crowded room. Debt reappears as solutions smoother, now packaged with reassurance and careful smiles. You accept because refusal would require certainty, and certainty left quietly weeks ago. Confidence narrows into hope, and hope shrinks into habit repeated, because stopping feels dangerous. The system absorbs strain silently, like a ceiling that does not creak until the final moment. You feel pride, resisting panic, insisting adaptation proves strength rather than desperation. Savings become memory spoken of in past tense, recalled the way you recall safer childhood streets. Dependency deepens, not forced but invited, because help that asks nothing feels merciful. You start measuring loss in comfort, not numbers, noticing what you no longer do without discussing why. The word temporary feels heavier now, weighted with effort every time you lift it. Nights bring calculations, instead of sleep mental arithmetic, replacing dreams. You sense trust thinning between people, glances lingering, longer voices lowering unconsciously. The currency still functions, and function continues to masquerade as health. You realize collapse does not announce itself. It blends in, wearing the clothes of normal days. And you continue forward because stopping to look would require admitting the ground is already moving. You notice reassurance now arrives faster than evidence. Words rushing in to fill spaces facts no longer comfortably occupy. Confidence feels contractual maintained because everyone agrees not to read the fine print too closely. The currency weakens politely, declining without drama, careful not to disturb routines, still pretending to matter. You tell yourself stability is proven by survival mistaking endurance for strength once again. Debt settles deeper into daily life, no longer emergency help, but assumed furniture you arrange around. You feel choice narrowing, not suddenly, but like a hallway, slowly filling with smoke. Officials speak of balance, yet everything feels heavier, as if gravity itself has quietly increased. You adjust expectations downward, calling it realism to avoid admitting loss. Temporary becomes conditional, stretched by phrases like, for now and until conditions improve. You sense trust turning inward individuals, relying on instinct rather than shared belief. The currency still circulates, but it no longer rests, passing quickly from hand to hand. Speed replaces confidence motion, standing in for faith. You feel watched by patience, the dangerous kind that waits rather than reacts. Small protections appear everywhere, hedges against uncertainty, disguised as prudence. You reassure yourself that preparation is not fear, though the line between them blurs nightly. Dependency feels normal now, like weather you plan around instead of challenge. You realize optimism has become conditional too, offered only when nothing immediately contradicts it. Confidence fades into procedure rules, followed because questioning them would slow the line. The system still stands, and standing becomes the only remaining definition of success. And you continue because stopping would require admitting temporary was never meant to end. You stop asking when recovery begins, and start asking how long things can remain this way without openly breaking. Confidence survives as choreography, familiar steps repeated, so no one notices the music has already stopped. The currency feels nervous now, exchanged quickly, unwilling to stay still long enough to be trusted. You hear officials say, temporary, with a different tone, slower, heavier, as if testing whether the word still works. Debt tightens gently, guiding choices without force, shaping behavior the way water shapes stone. You adapt again. Smaller meals, shorter plans, lighter promises, calling restraint maturity instead of retreat. The public learns the rhythm, spending fast, saving cautiously, speaking carefully. Confidence becomes private property, hoarded quietly, shared only with those who already doubt. You notice laughter changing, sharper defensive humor used to release pressure without naming it. Dependency feels permanent now, not imposed, but embedded, like wiring hidden behind finished walls. You begin measuring safety by routine, mistaking repetition for reassurance. The currency still functions, but its value feels negotiated daily, not assumed. Optimism requires effort, now a conscious act rather than a natural response. You feel patience wearing thin beneath polite surfaces. A collective breath held too long. Temporary stretches further, no longer a promise, but a placeholder for decisions never made. You sense confidence leaking into cynicism, belief replaced by calculation. The system absorbs this, quietly designed to function even when faith evaporates. You call this resilience, though it feels more like survival on reduced expectations. Collapse still feels distant because distance is easier to believe than inevitability. And you continue because letting go of temporary would mean admitting nothing is coming to save it. You wake with the sense that stability is being rehearsed, not lived, like a line read daily until it sounds convincing. The currency moves faster now, hands releasing it quickly, as if holding on too long might reveal something unpleasant. You notice how often reassurance arrives, Pre-written phrases recycled because originality would require honesty. Debt feels less like help and more like atmosphere surrounding you so completely it becomes invisible. Confidence shrinks into routine, preserved through repetition rather than belief. You accept smaller comforts without complaint, telling yourself moderation is wisdom, not adaptation to loss. The word temporary is still used, but only out of habit, like an old greeting no one expects answered. You sense impatience beneath calm voices, a tightness that suggests control is being forced rather than held. The system appears orderly, yet the order feels brittle, dependent on everyone pretending to believe simultaneously. You mistake coordination for strength, ignoring how easily synchronized motion can hide weakness. Dependency deepens quietly, expectations adjusting downward without announcement. Confidence becomes situational, present in speeches, absent in private calculations. You watch value drift lower, not falling, just settling into a place that feels harder to escape. People begin planning shorter futures conversations, ending closer to the present. Optimism sounds strained, now spoken like a favor rather than a fact. You tell yourself endurance proves stability, overlooking how endurance often precedes collapse. The currency still circulates, and circulation continues to be mistaken for health. You sense belief evaporating, leaving behind procedure and habit as substitutes. Temporary stretches into permanence without ceremony, unnoticed, because nothing dramatic announces the change. And you continue because stopping would mean admitting the story you trusted was only meant to buy time. You realize confidence now survives only in comparison, feeling acceptable because yesterday was worse, and tomorrow remains conveniently undefined. The currency no longer anchors value. It drifts, and you drift with it, adjusting footing without admitting the floor is gone. You hear officials speak of normalization, a word that smooths edges and dulls alarm like a practiced lullaby. Debt reshapes identity, quietly turning citizens into managers of scarcity rather than builders of futures. You feel pride recalibrate downward, learning to celebrate survival instead of progress. Temporary becomes a habit of speech, a reflex that buys silence when answers would cost authority. The system rewards calm faces, punishing honesty with isolation and subtle exclusion. You watch value slip sideways, not crashing, just migrating away from places you still stand. Confidence retreats into procedure again, hiding behind rules that cannot feel fear. People begin trusting instinct over policy, reading rooms instead of statements. You notice laughter thinning, smiles ending sooner, conversations closing without conclusions. Dependency feels absolute now, like gravity. You stopped questioning long ago. You tell yourself this phase will pass, though phases require movement and nothing is moving forward. The currency circulates faster speed, mistaken for vitality. You sense belief splitting public calm, masking private exit plans. Temporary stretches into manageable, a softer word with sharper consequences. Confidence becomes a rumor, repeated enough to sound familiar, not enough to feel true. You see resilience praised everywhere, yet exhaustion is what fills the streets. The system survives by narrowing, extracting quiet sacrifices instead of demanding loud ones. And you continue because admitting permanence would mean facing how long you agreed to pretend. You sense the word temporary losing meaning, stretched thin by repetition, until it feels like a sound without substance. Confidence survives only in motion, now believing speed alone can outrun the weight accumulating behind it. The currency circulates nervously, hands releasing it quickly, afraid possession will reveal its shrinking promise. Officials speak of adjustment, a careful word that implies control while quietly admitting loss. Debt settles deeper into daily rhythm, shaping choices so subtly they feel self-made. You notice how often calm is praised, even when calm looks like resignation. Trust fragments into personal strategies, everyone managing risk alone while pretending unity remains. Temporary solutions stack atop each other, forming a structure that sways yet never quite falls. You tell yourself, flexibility equals strength, ignoring how often flexibility follows surrender. The system keeps breathing shallow but steady, and that steadiness becomes your final reassurance. Confidence becomes something you reference historically, like a climate people once lived inside. You feel impatience sharpened beneath politeness, edges hidden to avoid provoking consequence. Dependency feels complete now, not imposed, but accepted as the price of continuity. The currency still buys time, but time itself has become more expensive each morning. You sense belief thinning to ritual gestures repeated without expectation of result. Temporary stretches further, a horizon that retreats whenever you approach it. You begin to fear permanence more than collapse, because permanence means this is the shape of things. Confidence leaks into cynicism calculation, replacing faith in every exchange. The system survives through compliance, not conviction, through habit rather than hope. And you continue because stopping would mean admitting temporary was never meant to save you. You realize the language has fully shifted, no longer asking when things improve, only how long they can be endured. Confidence survives as etiquette polite behavior exchanged to avoid confronting the hollowness underneath. The currency moves constantly now, speed mistaken for circulation, circulation mistaken for life. Officials speak of resilience with practiced warmth as if repeating the word can make it true again. Debt no longer feels external. It feels internal, shaping instincts before conscious thought intervenes. You notice planning horizons shrink, futures compressed into weeks where years once lived. Temporary becomes background noise heard, but no longer processed. The system maintains order through habit, not belief through routine rather than trust. You feel confidence fragment further, breaking into private calculations nobody shares aloud. Calm is preserved, carefully curated like a museum exhibit you are forbidden to touch. Dependency feels irreversible now, like a river you crossed without noticing the bridge burn. You tell yourself collapse would be louder, faster, more obvious, because quiet endings are harder to accept. The currency still functions, and function continues to be mistaken for recovery. Optimism sounds ceremonial spoken because silence would feel dangerous. You sense belief evaporating completely, leaving only compliance behind. Temporary stretches again, not forward, but inward, hollowing expectation from the center. The system survives by narrowing choice until obedience feels like relief. Confidence becomes something you reference defensively, invoked when challenged, never demonstrated. You feel permanence settling in, heavy and undeniable like dust after a long collapse. And you continue, because admitting permanence would mean admitting how long you agreed to pretend. In the end, nothing snaps or screams. The currency simply keeps losing meaning while everyone pretends continuity is recovery. You look back for the moment it failed, but find only countless small approvals made to avoid discomfort. Temporary was never a forecast, only a delay tactic, a word designed to stretch patience without restoring strength. Confidence dissolved, first traded away for calm days and managed headlines. By the time collapse is named, it has already finished doing its quiet work. The currency still exists, but existence without trust is just paper moving through hands. You realize value did not vanish suddenly. It leaked away through acceptance. Dependency became permanence the moment you stopped questioning it. Every collapse looks temporary at first, because belief always dies before numbers do. And when belief is gone, the fall feels inevitable, not dramatic, just the last step you delayed admitting.